A police officer found a lost little girl in the park, and when he looked closer at her name tag, it revealed she was his daughter. Have you ever wondered how a single moment, just one, can change everything you thought you knew about your life? Not with warning, not with preparation, but suddenly like lightning cutting through a clear sky. That's what happened to Officer James Miller, a man who started his shift believing it would be just another routine patrol, only to stumble into the most unexpected encounter of his entire life. But before we begin, where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comment below. I always love knowing where our community is tuning in from. Now, let's step into the story. The late afternoon sun stretched shadows across the park as James walked the gravel path, his boots moving with the steady rhythm of routine. The park was alive with ordinary sounds. Children laughing on the swings, a dog barking in the distance, the rustle of leaves as the wind stirred gently through the trees. To anyone else, it was just another peaceful day. And for James, it felt like any other shift. Familiar, predictable, safe, until it wasn't. Because beneath that cheerful noise, he heard it. A faint sound, fragile, trembling and out of place. A child's cry. James stopped, every instinct sharpened. Because in his line of duty, nothing ordinary ever stays ordinary for long. James slowed his pace, his ears straining. There was again a soft, broken sob, so faint it almost vanished beneath the chatter of families and the rustling of leaves. He turned his head, scanning the park. Children ran freely across the grass, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Parents chatted near the benches, distracted by phones, coffee cups, or conversations. But none of them seemed to notice. None of them heard what he heard. James's hand rested on his radio out of habit, but he didn't call it in. Not yet, because this sound wasn't a call for backup. It was smaller, fragile, the kind of cry that pierced not just the air, but the heart. He followed the sound past the paved walkway, his boots crunching over fallen leaves. Each step sharpened his awareness. Every instinct, every ounce of training told him something wasn't right. And then he saw her, a tiny figure huddled near the base of a tree, half hidden by its shadow. Her little shoulders trembled with each sob. Her tiny hands clutched the edges of her coat as though it were the only shield she had. James paused, his breath catching for just a moment, because this wasn't the face of danger he was trained to confront. This was something else, something far more delicate. He straightened slowly, then lowered himself, kneeling to the ground so he wouldn't tower over her. His voice softened, calm and steady, carrying the warmth of reassurance. "Hey there, it's all right. You're safe now." But the little girl didn't answer. Her wide eyes darted up at him, shimmering with tears, filled with fear. And in that single look, James felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This wasn't just a lost child. This was the beginning of something far bigger than he could yet imagine. James kept his posture low, careful not to move too quickly. In moments like this, it wasn't about being a police officer. It was about being human. He softened his tone, letting his words fall like a whisper carried by the wind. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here to help you." The little girl shifted, hugging her coat tighter, her eyes glistening with fear. She didn't speak, didn't move, just trembled. James had seen fear before, on crime scenes, in accidents, in people who had lost everything. But this was different. This was the fear of a child who felt completely alone. So he tried again. This time, he let a small, gentle smile break through the seriousness of his uniform. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Silence. The girl's lips parted, but no sound came. She only blinked, her tiny chest rising and falling in quick, uneven breaths. James felt his heart twist. He wanted to reach out, to wipe the tears from her cheeks, to promise her she was safe. But he knew better. Trust wasn't something you demanded. It was something you earned. He adjusted his voice once more, softer still. "You're not in trouble. I just want to help you find your family." The girl sniffled, eyes darting down to her coat. Her little hand, small, hesitant, lifted slightly. And then, instead of speaking, she pointed. James followed the gesture, his gaze settling on the fabric of her jacket. There, stitched neatly on the inside seam, was a small white name tag. And in that moment, as his eyes began to focus on the letters, the world around him started to shift. James's eyes fixed on the stitched letters. Laura Miller. The name hit him like a wave crashing against stone. It wasn't just a coincidence. It couldn't be. His breath caught in his chest, and suddenly, time seemed to fold back on itself. Memories he had fought so hard to bury came rushing back, uninvited, unstoppable. He saw her face. Lisa, the woman he had once sworn to love forever. The woman he thought he would build a life with. Their love story had started like so many others, young, wild, unstoppable. They had dreams, plans, promises whispered late into the night. And then the dream had crumbled. Arguments turned into shouting. Shouting turned into silence. And silence into a courtroom. James had fought for custody with every ounce of strength he had. But the system, the lawyers, the endless papers stacked against him, they all led to the same verdict. Lisa would take the child. He would not. He still remembered that day, sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the empty crib he had put together with his own hands. The smell of baby powder still lingering in the air. The sound of silence where laughter should have been. He was told to move on, told to let go, told that sometimes fathers didn't win. And so he poured himself into the badge, into the streets, into protecting strangers because he could not protect his own. But even years later, he never stopped wondering, what would she look like now? Did she smile like her mother? Did she laugh like him? Did she even know his name? And now, here she was, not in a courtroom, not in a dream, but in front of him, crying, trembling, lost in the park. His daughter. The weight of the years pressed down on him all at once. And James realized fate had just given the one thing he thought he'd lost forever. James's eyes lingered on the letters stitched into that small piece of fabric. Laura Miller. The world around him seemed to fade. The laughter in the distance, the bark of a dog, the rustle of the trees, all of it dissolved into silence. Because in that single moment, he wasn't standing in a park anymore. He was back in the delivery room, hearing the faint cry of a newborn. He was back in that small apartment, painting the walls of the nursery a pale shade of yellow, dreaming of bedtime stories and tiny footsteps. He was back in those endless nights of paperwork and court hearings, trying to prove he was good enough to be a father, trying to prove that his mistakes didn't mean he didn't deserve her. And then he was back in that one memory that never left him. Lisa's voice, cold and final. You'll never see her again. That sentence had lived inside him for years. It had echoed in the silence of his home. It had hardened him in ways he never admitted, even to himself. But now, here she was, the little girl who carried his name stitched to her coat, the child he thought had been erased from his life forever. He studied her carefully, her tear-streaked face, the curve of her chin, the way her eyes shimmered in the light. And in those eyes, he saw something familiar, something achingly familiar. It was like looking into a mirror of his own childhood. The same shape, the same depth, the same silent plea. James felt a tremor run through him. Not of fear, not of doubt, but of recognition. This wasn't just any child. This was his child, his daughter. The flood of memories, the years of emptiness, the battles he had lost, they all collided with the reality in front of him. And in a whisper, barely audible, as though afraid the truth might vanish if he said it too loud, he spoke her name. Laura, Laura. The name trembled off James's lips, almost as if he was afraid to claim it. Afraid that if he spoke it too boldly, the fragile reality before him might dissolve into nothing but smoke and memory. The little girl lifted her head at the sound. Her wide eyes met his, eyes that carried both fear and something hauntingly familiar. James's breath caught, because in that moment, he didn't just see her, he recognized her. The curve of her nose, the faint dimple that surfaced when her lip quivered, even the way she tilted her head slightly, cautious but curious. It was all him, little pieces of himself, living and breathing in front of him. And for the first time in years, he felt the armor of his uniform crack. The badge on his chest, the gun on his hip, the steady rhythm of duty, all of it fell away. He wasn't Officer Miller right now. He wasn't a man on patrol. He was just the father, a father staring at the daughter he thought he'd lost forever. The urge to reach out was almost unbearable, to wipe her tears, to pull her close, to tell her she never had to feel afraid again. But restraint held him back. One wrong move, and he could scare her even more. So instead, he let his voice carry the warmth his hands couldn't. "You're not alone anymore, sweetheart. I promise." And though she didn't speak, though she only clutched her coat tighter, something in her gaze shifted. A flicker, a quiet recognition, as though some part of her soul already knew this man was not a stranger. James's training pressed against his instincts like a weight. The officer in him knew exactly what to do. A lost child meant one thing: protocol, secure the scene, call dispatch, wait for guardians or child services to step in. It was simple. It was clear. It was what the badge demanded. But the father in him, the man who had whispered her name only moments ago, he wanted to do the opposite. He wanted to hold her, to tell her who he was, to bridge the years that had been stolen from them. His hand hovered near the radio clipped to his shoulder. He hesitated. The words felt like iron lodged in his throat. Finally, with a steady breath, he pressed a button. "Dispatch! This is Officer Miller. I've located a lost child in Northwood Park. Female, approximately 6 years old. Brown hair, blue coat." His voice sounded calm, professional, but inside, every syllable tore at him, because he couldn't bring himself to say it. He couldn't tell them her full name. He couldn't say Laura Miller. The moment he did, the world would know. And once the system had her name, there'd be no turning back. The line crackled back with a standard response. "Copy that, officer. Units will notify local guardians. Remain on scene." James lowered his hand, the radio still hissing softly. His pulse hammered in his ears. For the first time in his career, following the rules didn't feel like protection. It felt like betrayal, because with every passing second, the truth grew louder inside him. This wasn't just another child. This was his child. And now he had to decide, was he going to stay the officer? Or was he finally going to be the father? Minutes stretched like hours. James knelt beside the little girl, her soft sobs fading into quiet sniffles. He stayed close, not touching her, but never letting her feel alone. And then, the sound of hurried footsteps. Fast, uneven, desperate. James turned his head. A woman came rushing through the trees, her breath heavy, her face pale with panic. Her eyes scanned the park wildly until they landed on the small figure by the tree. Laura. The name cracked through the air like thunder. The little girl's head shot up, her tears replaced with sudden relief. She bolted from James's side, running straight into the woman's arms. James rose slowly to his feet. His chest tightened as he watched the embrace, the mother clutching her daughter so tightly, as though letting go might mean losing her forever. And in that embrace, he saw her, Lisa. Time had etched faint lines on her face, but her presence was unmistakable. The woman he had once loved, the woman he had once dreamed of raising a family with, the woman who had taken that family away. Lisa pulled back just enough to check Lara's face, kissing her forehead, whispering words James couldn't hear. Relief poured from her in sobs and trembling hands. And then her eyes lifted. For the first time in years, they locked on him. The air between them shifted instantly. No words, no greetings. Just a silence that burned with history. Lisa's expression hardened, as though the relief she felt only moments ago had been ripped away by the sight of his uniform. Her voice was sharp, controlled, but laced with an old wound. "James." It wasn't spoken with warmth. It wasn't spoken with hatred. It was spoken like a name she never expected to say again. And just like that, the reunion of mother and daughter had become something far more complicated. Because this wasn't just a lost child anymore. This was a collision of the past. The mother who had left, the father who had been left behind, and the little girl caught in the middle. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air was thick, charged with years of silence, anger, and unresolved grief. Lisa held Laura close, her hand protectively wrapped around the little girl's shoulder, as though James might reach forward and take her away. And James, he stood rooted to the ground, torn between the duty of his badge and the ache of his heart. Finally, Lisa broke the silence. Her words came low, steady, but sharp enough to cut. "You shouldn't be here." James felt the sting. He wanted to snap back, to remind her it was his job to be here, that he wasn't searching for her. He was protecting the park. But the truth pressed harder against his chest. He wasn't here by chance. Fate had led him to this moment. He swallowed. His voice was measured, but beneath it burned years of buried pain. "I didn't plan this, Lisa, but I found her. Alone. Scared. What did you expect me to do? Walk away?" Lisa's eyes narrowed, but he caught the flicker of guilt behind them. "I've raised her on my own for years. She doesn't need confusion. She doesn't need..." She stopped herself, but James knew what she wanted to say. "She doesn't need you." The words hovered unspoken, heavy in the air. His jaw tightened, his voice dropping, raw. "You took her from me. You said I'd never see her again. Do you have any idea what that did to me? What it's been like, knowing she's out there, but being treated like I'm already dead to her?" Lisa flinched at his words, her grip on Laura tightening. Her own voice trembled now. Not with anger, but with the exhaustion of a woman who had carried her choices for too long. "I was scared, James. I didn't trust you back then. I didn't trust the life you were leading. And I thought keeping her away was the only way to keep her safe." Her confession cut through him, not because it absolved her, but because it revealed the same thing he felt: fear. For a heartbeat, their eyes softened. Two people, once bound by love, now bound only by the child standing between them. But the tension didn't fade, because forgiveness was a mountain neither of them was ready to climb. And in that moment, James realized the past wasn't going to stay buried. It had followed them both right into the park. The standoff between James and Lisa hung heavy in the air. Two adults, scarred by the past, locked in silence, too afraid to say what they truly felt. And then, a small voice broke through. Laura tilted her head upward, her wide eyes moving from her mother to the uniformed man standing so close. Her little hand clutched the hem of Lisa's coat, but her gaze was fixed on James. Her words were quiet, but clear enough to shatter both their defenses. "Mommy, why does he have my name too?" The world seemed to stop. The rustle of trees, the distant hum of traffic, even the sound of Lisa's breath. It all faded, leaving only the weight of that question. James's heart clenched. Her voice, soft, uncertain, was the voice he had dreamed of hearing for years. He wanted to answer. He wanted to fall to his knees, take her tiny hand in his, and say the words he kept locked inside. "Because I'm your father." But he couldn't. Not yet. Lisa's eyes widened, caught completely off guard. She opened her mouth, but no answer came. Because how do you explain years of silence? How do you explain the choices that kept them apart? Laura blinked, confusion clouding her innocent face. She tugged at Lisa's coat again. "Mommy, why is he looking at me like that?" Her question cut deeper than any accusation. Because Laura wasn't asking about police procedures or family courts or broken promises. She was asking about something simple, something only a child could see. The look of recognition. The look of love. The look of a father who had found what he thought was lost forever. Lisa's throat tightened. She could feel James's eyes on her, begging for an answer, begging for truth. But she stayed silent. And in that silence, Lara's innocent question hung between them. Fragile, beautiful, and impossible to ignore. The park was quiet. But inside, James's world was anything but. His heart hammered against his chest, tore between duty and desire. On one side, procedure. The voice of the officer inside him, reminding him what he should do. File the report. Hand the child back to her mother. Walk away. Pretend nothing happened. On the other side, his heart, the voice that whispered, "This is your daughter." The little girl whose name had lived only in memory until this very moment. James's breath caught as he looked at Laura. Her small fingers were still curled tightly around Lisa's coat, her eyes searching for answers neither adult seemed ready to give. Lisa stood frozen, her lips pressed together, her gaze avoiding his. But in her silence, James recognized something. Fear. Fear of reopening old wounds. Fear of letting him in. Fear of losing control over the life she had built without him. For a long, heavy pause, no one spoke. Just 3 lives standing at the crossroads of past and future. And then James made his choice. He knelt again, lowering himself to Lara's level. His voice was soft, steady, filled with a warmth he hadn't let himself show in years. Lara, you're safe. That's what matters. And no matter what happens tonight, you'll never be alone again. Lisa's eyes darted toward him, stunned by the weight of his words. It wasn't a declaration of war. It wasn't a demand. It was a promise. A promise spoken not from the badge on his chest, but from the father's heart he could no longer deny. The decision had been made. James was no longer just the officer following procedure. He was a father ready to fight for the chance he thought had been stolen forever. The question now wasn't whether he loved her. It was whether Lisa would let him. The night air had grown cooler. The park, once filled with the echoes of a child's cries, now carried only the soft hum of crickets and the rustle of leaves. James stood a few steps back, watching. Lisa held Lara's small hand, guiding her gently down the path. And yet, every so often, Lara would glance over her shoulder, her eyes searching for him. The man she somehow felt was more than just the kind officer who had found her. James exhaled slowly, the weight of the evening pressing into his chest. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But tonight, he knew something had changed. Lisa finally stopped, turning halfway toward him. Her expression wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. It was guarded, cautious, but not without possibility. James, she began softly, almost reluctantly. Her eyes flickered to Lara, then back to him. We'll talk soon. Those 3 words carried more power than an entire courtroom of arguments. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a door, cracked open just enough for hope to breathe. James nodded, no demands, no desperate pleas. Just a quiet acknowledgement, because sometimes the first step forward doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers. Lara tugged Lisa's hand, her little voice breaking the silence. Mommy, will the nice officer visit us? Lisa's face faltered, torn between old wounds and the innocence of her daughter's question. And in that fragile moment, the future didn't feel impossible anymore. James's lips curved into the faintest smile. He didn't answer aloud, but in his heart, he whispered a promise. A father's place is not lost. It is only waiting to be found again. And so, under the quiet glow of the streetlights, the 3 of them parted ways. Not as strangers, not yet as family, but as something new, fragile, uncertain, and precious. A new beginning waiting to be written. And that is where their story leaves us tonight. A father, a daughter, and a mother standing at the edge of something both painful and beautiful. What would you do if fate handed you back the family you thought was gone forever? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And if this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to Heartfelt Tales TV, where stories of love, loss, and hope come alive. Because sometimes the most powerful tales are the ones that remind us we're never truly alone.